Hi, everybody. Welcome to my bookshelf by Emma Gomez. Before we get started, I just wanted to thank the PTA for considering our request to enhance our library. You will find 10 different genres with an array of books from each genre in this presentation to take into your consideration. Let's get started. So, for our first genre, we have well illustrated books, and for this category, I picked Rainbow Fish by Marcus Pfister, which is such a great book. Even though both of these books are kind of older, they have great meanings. So, Rainbow Fish is a cautionary tale about sharing, and it follows this fish around, the rainbow fish who lives in the ocean, and all the other sea creatures are fascinated with his scales, how pretty he is, his colors, and he shares them with every other fish until eventually he has none left. And it just follows his story about being selfless, and it's a beautiful story, and I think children will absolutely love it. And then the next one we have is Charlotte's Web by E.B. White, and it's about a friendship between Wilbur, who's a pig, and Charlotte, who's a spider. And it's on this farm, and they rescue Wilbur, who is the runt of the litter, from being slaughtered. Um, and then Wilbur grows up, and then he befriends a spider named Charlotte, and it just tells the story of them two. And there's even a little song that goes along with it, which kids probably are familiar with by now. And both of these books are just amazing. I personally love them, and I think the children will too. Alright, so our next category is multicultural books. So in this category, I picked two. The first one is Whoever You Are by Mem Fox, and it's about how everybody in the world may look different on the outside, as we all do, and they live different lives, but we all basically have the same heart, and we're all the same on the inside. And it's such a beautiful story and just an important lesson for children to learn. So the next book I picked is A Ticket Around the World by Natalia Diaz and Melissa Owens, and it's about a young boy who travels around the globe to visit his friends. And during the book, he visits Canada, Costa Rica, the United States, France, Morocco, Greece, etc., etc. But it just shows how different cultures live and how many different people there are in the world, which is important for children to learn, especially at a young age. Okay, so in this category, it's picture books, and the first one I have is Dear Zoo by Rod Campbell, and it's about a story of a young child's love for the zoo and for the zoo animals, most importantly, of course. I know when I was younger, I used to love going to the zoo, and we used to do it actually pretty frequently because we lived really close to a zoo, and I just can imagine many other kids loving this book. And this story is super cute because the little child asked the zoo to send them a pet. So I just think it's really warm hearted and a really good book. So the second book I chose was On the Farm by Axel Scheffler. And this one is just about Axel on a farm where little ones can join in on the fun farm with the different noises that farm animals make, learning about what animals do, the noises they make, what they look like, all of that. And then the last book I chose for this category, it's a little bit cut off there, but it is Cars, Cars, Cars by Donna David. And it's just about the different colors of cars, types of cars, different cars that people drive. It's really good for kids to see and learn about. And I just think all of these books have a really cute meaning to them, and it's very lighthearted and really fun for kids. It's moving on to our next category or genre. We have poetry for children. So the first one I picked was Twinkle Twinkle Little Star by Jane Taylor. And the poem is just it's amazing at rhyming. I know everybody has heard this poem. I know the kids will be really familiar with it, but I personally have never read the poem until I started researching it for this class, and I think it's just such a cute little poem for kids and even for me because I thought it was really inspiring. All right, so the next poem I chose was Caterpillar by Christina Rossetti. And so this poem just describes a caterpillar. It's brown and furry. It describes the caterpillar's life in different stages throughout this short poem, and then eventually it becomes a butterfly. So it's basically like Mother Nature in this poem, which was kind of like a theme here, like nature, the outside, animals. So I think all these books or poems really fit well together, and that's why I chose them. And then lastly, the last poem I chose was, of course, I had to throw in a Dr. Seuss because he is the master at the poems for children. Um, so this one is One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish by Dr. Seuss. So the poem is about so it's the book follows a narrator who visits a pet store. And there's a variety of different fish, obviously at pet stores, and they all have different personalities and behaviors, and each fish is described through these different colors, bright colors for children, which is great for them, stories, and most importantly, rhymes. I love this story for the rhymes, or this poem for the rhymes. I think they all have great rhymes in all of them. So the next genre we have is folklore, and the first one I picked was Little Red Riding Hood, retold by Nadia Higgins. And I loved this story growing up, and I think the children would too when I will read it to them. So it's about a young village girl who lives with her mom, and she has a little red riding hood to wear, which is the name of the story, and everyone refers to her as Little Red Riding Hood. And one day, the girl's mother asks her to go visit her grandmother who lives in the next village through the forest, and it just shows her adventure going through the forest on her quest to go see her grandmother. And then the next book we have in folklore is Jack and the Beanstalk. So I personally never read this one before. I always heard of it, and so while researching it, I thought that this would be a great one to include in the folklore genre. So it's a story about a young poor boy living with his mom in a tiny little house, and they are really poor, and their only means of a small income is a cow. And one day the cow stops giving milk, and so Jack is sent off to the market to sell it. And so the major theme in the story is the concept of good versus evil, which I thought was perfect to include in this presentation so that the children can learn more about, good versus evil. And another major theme in this story is overcoming adversity and working through your problems and becoming one. Okay, so the next genre we have here is modern fantasy, which I was really excited to do this one because I think modern fantasy in children's books is super fun and you have a lot to play around with. But for this slide, I chose to focus on two that I really love. So the first one is Wizard of Oz by L. Frank Baum. And I'm sure we've all seen Wizard of Oz. I loved the movie. I've never read the book, but I think it would be so much fun to read the book and have, when you're reading a book to children, I know when I was younger, I would get this image in my head of what was going on in the story and what everything looked like. And so when I actually watched the movie, it was different. So it creates that kind of imaginary specific thing for them too. So it's just the chronicles and adventure of a young farm girl named Dorothy and her pet dog Toto, as we all know, and a tornado or cyclone comes in their home in Kansas, and she has these sparkly red shoes and she clicks them together, and she meets many different characters along the way, which added to her story. And it's just a super fun, lighthearted book. I love it, and the movie is amazing. I think if I was teaching this to my kids, I would definitely show the book along with it. I mean, the movie along with it, because I just love it so much. All right, and then the next one we have is Alice's Adventures in Wonderland by Lewis Carroll. So this was actually created in 1865, this story, and it's about a young girl named Alice who falls through a rabbit hole and then enters a fantasy world with so many different creatures, and it just shows her adventure down this rabbit hole of this tree, and it's an amazing book, and I think the children would love it. So the next genre we have is contemporary realistic fiction, and the first one I have on here is Diary of a Wimpy Kid by Jeff Kinney, and this story is about Greg Heffley, and it's his first day of middle school. He gets teased by his older brother Roderick, who are kind of the mean two characters in this series of books, and it just shows his experience during the first day of school and so on, and we watch him grow up too. The second one I picked is Because of Winn-Dixie by Kate DiCamillo, and this is about a lonely girl named Opal who is new to town, but even though she's lonely, she seems to make friends everywhere she goes. And this begins with a stray dog named Winn-Dixie. It takes place in a small town of Naomi, Florida during the summer. And it's just a beautiful story about friendship and dogs, of course. And then I wanted to add new books that I haven't read in this presentation. So one that I found that I thought would be perfect for this genre was The Lemonade War by Jacqueline Davies. And so it's about Evan and his younger sister, Jessie, who react differently to the news that they will be in the same fourth grade class, and they battle it out through lemonade stands, each trying to be the first to win $100, or not win, earn $100, and it's just a cute little lighthearted book for kids. So the next genre we have is historical fiction, and the first one I chose is kind of a different one than what I've been doing. So this one is a series of 12 different books. They're all called I Survived by Lauren Tarshish, and she just writes all these books about different events that have happened in real life, but it's for children and children proof. And so they're all great books. There's some about surviving 9/11, surviving the Titanic, surviving the wars, etc., etc. And I just think if we got these in the library, that children could learn more and learn more about history in a more fun way, I guess. And then the second book I have is Esperanza Rising by Pan Munoz, and it's about this little girl named Esperanza who lives in Mexico with her family, and it just shows her life. It shows her growing up, all the hardships she has to deal with while living in Mexico, and I just think it has such a powerful meaning to it. And then the last book I chose was A Place to Hang the Moon by Kate Albus, and this was about 3 orphan kids in England during the World War II evacuation, and it just shows them how they survived during this and their experience and the hardships they had to go through. So the next genre is biographies, and the first one I have is On a Beam of Light by Jennifer Byrne, and this is about Albert Einstein and how he became one of the most famous scientists in the world. It just takes you through his life and how he became one of the most famous scientists in the world. And then the next one we have is Margaret and the Moon by Dean Robbins, and this one is about how a girl named Margaret saved the moon landing with one of her codes that worked. And it's just a really beautiful story, especially because it's a woman who did it. I think that children need to be exposed to that kind of stuff. And then the last one is Human Computer, Mary Jackson Engineer by Andy Dean. This one reminded me of, and I think it's based on, or the book, The movie is based on this book, Hidden Figures. I went and saw that movie when it came out. I actually saw it in 8th grade, so I was still kind of young, and I absolutely loved that movie. It had such a powerful message, and this has the same thing about how a woman who is a different race can accomplish amazing things. So the next and last final genre we have is informational books. And for this one, I chose Over and Under the Pond by Kate Messner. And this one is about what goes on underneath the water. We all see above the water and how it reflects the sky and everything above it, but what is actually going on underneath the water? And it's just a hidden world of different creatures and ecosystems. And I think it's a brilliant book for children to learn, and such a fun book, fun way for children to learn about nature. And then the second book I have is Homes in the Wild, Where Baby Animals and Their Parents Live by Lita Judge. I thought this one was important to include to just expose children to they both kind of have the same theme of, natural habitats and Mother Nature and learning about the outdoors. So thank you so much for listening to my presentation and considering these books. Thanks.